It's Liv pronounced and I just thought I'd go over my kind of journey on how I went from hiding a lot of my identity to being a lot more open and inclusive towards my identity. And I don't know if we'll have time for this in this video, but kind of a little bit of how it's impacted my awareness of my own personal biases and how being more open about what I identify has helped me recognize both my support needs and the support needs of other individuals from marginalized groups, while also understanding that as a white person, I'm coming from a place of privilege. So I talked a little bit about myself in, I think, at least a video, if not both, all the past videos, but it kind of started with when I was a kid. It was kind of a mix of having access to things that assisted in me being different and acknowledging it and getting the support I needed, while also very much being a product of where language was at the time and not always having the language available to me that helped me understand myself in a way that allowed me to know that I was anything other than coming from a place of privilege. So in early elementary school, and there's some report cards from preschool and kindergarten that say that I held the pencil at the eraser end and that my handwriting needed a lot of support, and learning how to write needed a lot of support. So that was kind of part of the reason why I was able to get recommendations from my teachers when I was fairly young, especially being someone that's assigned female at birth. It's really hard for assigned female individuals to get access to medical professionals that diagnose neurodivergence and other related things. A lot of the times it's a little bit more of high masking, gifted and talented, those types of situations that can lead to things like depression and anxiety, kind of masking other related diagnoses. But we'll unpack that a different day. But the point I'm trying to make is I was super lucky that I was able to get diagnosed with a nonverbal learning disability in early elementary school, and that my first school, the first schools that I went to had the ability to give me the support I needed in order to succeed as a student. And they were not only did that, but they were able to do it in a way that didn't draw attention to the fact I didn't feel like I was standing out as a student. It was more of hey, each student has different support needs, so we're going to adapt our resources to meet the needs of each student, rather than that kid has a lot of problems or they're different or that kind of stuff. It was just kind of everybody has differences, let's celebrate that, instead of making that kid feel less than or they're not supported or whatever. And it wasn't until we switched to a school that just didn't seem to have those ideals. I was also lucky the schools that had more diverse students were a lot better equipped to not just say that they're a safe space for everybody, but also show that their teachers had and administration had those values. And it was when I switched to a school that just wasn't as equipped or ready to support neurodivergent kids, or they did it in a way that made it seem like it was bad to be neurodivergent. Kids are mean. Hate is not an innate trait, it's learned. So the kids in that particular district were very cliquey, and I took away from that okay, I need to hide that I am learned differently. And without knowing what masking was, I learned how to mask. In tandem with that, I was assigned female at birth. I didn't know that the word non-binary, I didn't know that was a choice. I didn't know that having gender neutral pronouns was a choice. So at the time, it felt like my only choices for being a quote girl were to be a tomboy or girly girl. And I mostly gravitated to being a tomboy, without really understanding what that really meant, or I just assumed that I was a cis straight person for my entire childhood. When I was in my 20s, finishing up college and starting to do the seasonal type of temporary work that, the joke is like you have to gain experience in order before you can gain experience, and like all that kind of stuff. I was starting to realize that, and I was in environmental education at the time, so I was working a lot of nature centers and camps, that not everybody had the same level of support at field trips, and often the people that missed out on field trips were neurodivergent individuals or disabled people, or a combination of whatever conditions that made it harder for them to have supports on field trips. And it was hard for me to, when I was asking questions and like trying to figure out why that wasn't okay with me, or like what areas of growth needed, or how I wanted to be a better naturalist. A lot of nature centers at the time were just starting to have those conversations. So I switched from working at nature centers to working with autistic kids. And as I was doing research about that, I was realizing like, oh, I need to stop. If I'm going to be a better support person to neurodivergent kids or disabled kids, I need to be more honest with myself. I learned what masking was. I learned about, making sure that if I'm a provider for disabled individuals, that I'm doing it in a way that respects them as an individual and gives them autonomy over their treatment or whatever supports they're needing in whatever job I was in at the time. And once I started doing more research and realizing that I was masking and trying to unmask, and realizing that if I'm doing my best to show people that I respect them as a person and show the golden rule sounds corny, but like if I'm doing the best to treat other people the way I want to be treated, and people still have a problem with me, and the problem they have with me is because of the traits that make me different than a neurotypical cis straight person, then that's their problem. It's not my problem. I was starting to realize that the people that I need in my life, which granted you can't necessarily control your coworkers, but the people that I was wanting to exude more energy on and make more connections with are very much like quality over quantity. So once I was making those decisions, I started thinking about if I'm realizing that I'm not actually, like, I need to stop hiding that I'm neurodivergent, that passing for neurotypical isn't the same as being neurotypical. Maybe I need to start thinking about the other ways that I need to be more mindful of what my identity is. So I, in my 20s, was trying different like ways of getting into dating, and it was mostly online, and I was realizing that online dating just doesn't make any sense to me. And I was thinking, because dating was something that I'd always wanted to try, but I didn't really have the skills to navigate it. And I always thought that was a neurodivergent trait. My current diagnosis that I received in high school was working memory problems with nonverbal tendencies, which basically means that although the learning disabilities I had were no longer, I caught up with my peers, I'm always going to be neurodivergent. Working memory relates to things like recall and shifting memory from short-term to long-term memory. Nonverbal refers to my ability to understand social skills and how other people perceive my social skills. I'm of the personal opinion that it was more so not like made up terminology, because I've seen some of those diagnoses in other, like, as traits of other neurodivergent diagnoses, but it felt more like somebody just wanted to give me a diagnosis because you don't suddenly, my neurotype is not going to change just because I caught up to my peers academically. So it was more of in my opinion, it was more of a way for me to still get services if I needed them and support for being neurodivergent and protected on more of like a legal standpoint. But to me, it doesn't really feel like someone took the time to determine my specific diagnoses. If I were to take the test again as an adult, I would suspect I would end up getting ADHD diagnosis. But the point is, I prefer neurodivergent. But the reason why I started thinking about other aspects of my identity is I thought, maybe my lack of desire to date and understand dating and enthusiasm for real world dating, like, I'm happy to hear of other people being successful in relationships, romantic relationships. I'm happy to ship fictional characters, all that kind of stuff. I just don't necessarily feel like I have a strong desire for it myself. I don't often feel romantic feelings with other people. And I learned the word aromantic. And as I was thinking about that, I started thinking about whether or not it was ace, and started really realizing that everything in life is a spectrum, not just one's neurotype or how they feel about romance or how they feel sexually toward somebody else. So that got me thinking about, things like gender, and realizing that because I was starting to make friendships more quality versus quantity, I was surrounding myself with other people that are neurodivergent, other people having the same conversations with themselves about whether or not the language they used for themselves growing up was applicable as an adult. And I had other people start thinking about, like, okay, if I don't think being assigned female at birth fits, what's the alternatives? So I finally got to a point where it's like, okay, I have not been utilizing my white privilege effectively. I have not been making steps to show I support marginalized groups, and I decided to start putting my pronouns in my bio and like email signature. And it was after that I saw like she, her in those contexts, and I was like, oof, that doesn't feel good to me. That's not quite right. So I've since then played around with how much gender neutral pronouns I work for me in that moment, because it's a spectrum. If they, them isn't quite it, do I need other like gender neutral pronouns, and just starting to really be open to the idea of like, okay, I know I'm not a woman, nor am I a man. So I identify as the umbrella term non-binary. I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. What other terms within that umbrella terminology do I need, if any, to help me feel more resonant with who I actually am rather than what society is telling me I am? And through that, I started thinking about like, okay, how can I express that I'm non-binary? How can I express myself in a way that is more true to how I identify in all aspects of my identity? If I am non-binary and I feel like there's some dysmorphia with my chest, or if instead of wanting to wait until I'm feeling completely miserable and I want to feel better about myself before I have those strong feelings of despair and dysmorphia, what can I do to feel euphoric? So I started following more like Instagram and Facebook accounts of people that were under similar journeys, and realizing that you don't have to feel miserable in order to fit in a marginalized group. I wanted to feel joy in my self-discovery and growth. So that's how I started realizing that I was enough for things like finding a therapist that is supportive of marginalized groups, looking into top surgery, which I've successfully completed, and there'll probably be a summary video once I have a couple more weeks of very gentle medical restrictions that I'm waiting, so that way when I post to YouTube, I can post it in all one longer video rather than smaller videos like I do on Instagram. And then because I was like, man, these strangers on the internet, this parasocial relationship, they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to take the time out of their day to educate people, but they still chose to. And sure, that helped me, and they probably don't know that they're helping me specifically, but they did it with an intent of trying to help. So I don't know how many people are going to have access to my account. I'm still pretty small compared to some of the other social media presences out there, but I know it helped me to experience that representation of other people sharing their experiences within marginalized groups and how they feel supported and the best ways to navigate diverse opinions within marginalized groups and figure out the best way to balance supporting individual needs with holistic needs. So that's part of the reason why I started posting videos and educational content to Instagram, and why I'm going to shift a little bit more to YouTube, so that way I can, it's not about how many people are watching, it's about getting my content to the right people. And I hope that because other people were able to help me without knowing it, that even if I never end up with like hundreds of viewers, it still reaches the right people that find a meaning from it and feel like, okay, this person went through their journey that is similar to what I'm going through, and I now know a little bit better of what to expect. For example, if someone's getting top surgery, or like I now know how to advocate for myself better, or I'm coming from a place of privilege and I accidentally had biases and did a microaggression, and like I want to learn from that experience and do better.